Hello and welcome to the Mobilize Your Message podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniela.
And I'm Patricio.
And we are so excited that you are here. And thank you for joining us for episode 1. You are the pioneers here with us as we kick off this amazing podcast. We are just so blessed. We want to just jump right in. I'm so excited for this. This has been a long time coming. We have done all kinds of different ideas for podcasts and things like that, but I think this is about time.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm really excited for it.
I am too. Yeah. And, we have been so blessed to build a thriving online community. Yeah. We have people that we have had the pleasure of working with in the very things that we're going to talk about in this podcast. Yeah. So hang on for the ride. You are going to enjoy it. And like the title of this podcast episode says, you were born to influence, and we want to show you how to get started in that.
Yeah, that sounds so good. I am so excited to start. And I think God is going to move in an amazing way. So
let's just start off. Who are we? Okay. Yes. Let's get started there. We just want to tell you a little bit about ourselves, about our story, and what is this Mobilize Your Message podcast hosted by Network for the Kingdom? What is Network for the Kingdom? We want to just jump right into that. So would you like to go first? Should I start?
I think you should start. I think you should start. Definitely.
So, tell you a little bit about myself. So, my name is Daniela. I call myself a story creation coach. God has given me that term. And a big part of what I am blessed and gifted to do is to help people to uncover their influential kingdom assignments. And that's part of the mission of Network for the Kingdom. And this whole podcast is we want people to really understand that they have power in their story, that they have the ability to share that story with a global audience, thanks to certain structures that are in place today, and that they were born to influence. So if you have landed in this podcast, there's a reason that you're here. Don't think that it's an accident that you are here. There's a reason that you are here. We can know lots of things about the algorithm, but we know God ultimately can bring a video to who it needs to get to in the right timing. So there's a reason that you're listening to us here today. So a little bit about myself, my background. I have a background in English education. I used to teach English in middle school English, and I loved doing it. I knew from the time that I was a little girl that I would love books and stories. We always joke, my mom and I would always make the joke that I didn't care if you would take away my TV shows or my Game Boy Color or whatever else I had. It was if you took away my book, that was punishment, because I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I wanted to know so badly. So I knew from the time I was a little girl that I would do something in the realm of teaching, of education, and especially in the realm of English and literature. So those were really important things to me growing up. And so just a little bit about my background. Grew up in an Italian American home. So that came with some cultural things that I learned. And part of what we're going to talk about this podcast is the Seven Mountain Mandate and what does kingdom culture look like versus the culture that maybe you grew up in. And part of taking on the identity of kingdom might be navigating some things that you were taught culturally that may not be kingdom, and some things that might be. So just a little tidbit to throw in there. That's just a little bit about my early upbringing. I'm going to get into a little more of my story today, but do you want to share a little bit about your early upbringing?
Yes, of course. So my name is Patricio Ordonez. I am originally from South America, Ecuador. I grew up in a country that was third world country. Come from a very poor background. Came to America when I was 13. Found Christ when I was 23. And since I found Christ, I started walking in authority and power. And I think I've been praying for God, to show me the revelation of what He wants me to do. What is my purpose? What is my authority? What is my field of favor? Like some of our friends say. And last year in December, was it December or September? September, I left my 9 to 5. But I first prayed. There's a story to that, which I will be sharing here. But I am a digital marketing expert. I help people with different type of stories. So basically, creating content, helping them go higher in their content creation and digital marketing, and helping them mobilize their message.
Talk a little bit about your early upbringing, though,
You
because
want to go deeper already? Oh, let's go.
Yeah, I think that it's important because of the background that you came from, right? And a lot of the things that we're going to get into in this podcast, I think your background is significant in how you got to where you are today. So talk a little bit about that and what your early dreams were, and then we can talk about how you got to where you are now. Then I'll share a little bit of mine. So talk about your early.
So basically, I grew up in a third world country. I had two pair of shoes, one for Sunday, one for the week. My house was literally made of dirt. It was not bricks. It was none of that stuff, but it was straight made of dirt. Sometimes I'll see like spiders like come out in and out of the house, like big spiders, not little ones, but like big spiders. And I would just ask my grandma, like, what is that big spider? She's like, yeah, don't worry about it. She's like, don't worry about it. They're gonna go right out. So my grandma used to be the person that used to say, if you it doesn't matter if you're poor, but if you're clean and you sew your clothes, they can't tell. So I used to help her work with the farming. I used to, be able to. I remember the first time that she told me to plant something were beans, and she's like, if you plant it, you have to be patient and you gotta wait for a couple months, and then you'll sow. That was the first encounter that I ever had with the principle of the Bible that says the sowing and reaping. So I was there. I was a very, very curious kid. I used to like burn the woods and with like fire stuff. Like they used to have fun with me. And so at 13 years old, I came to America, and then I went through a season of like learning English, kind of like getting bullied a little bit for being a Spanish person, not knowing English, and that took me to a different toll. And then through middle school and high school, it was like a very rough years because I'm like trying to learn English, but I'm trying to relate to people at the same time. And so, I went through a season of just being lost, like a season of trying to find my identity, a season of trying to find myself. And so that season, I grew up. My mom used to work a lot when she was in America, so she used to work a lot. I barely used to see her. Now, in the picture comes. Let me track a little bit. My dad left when I was 2, and my mom left when I was 5 to come to America to give me a better place to live, right? To give me a better future, which she did, right? And so I'm in America, experiencing like bully, experiencing, people just because people bully what they cannot understand, basically. And so that happened. Now in America, I get lost for a season. I lost my identity, start going through like clubs, doing all that stuff.
Before you get into all of that, I just want to interject really quickly, because I know when you tell our stories, we can kind of go into all of the pieces of it. But I just want to go into the early parts because I think a lot of that shapes who you are as a person, and especially when you're starting out at such a young age. I know you didn't mention it, but even like with your early upbringing of having certain dreams and wanting to do things and wanting to be a person of influence. Maybe you'll talk a little more about that in a little bit about this thing with soccer. But I can also resonate with that, and it's interesting because when you're called, and I think all of you who are listening right now, you have a level of feeling like you've been called to some kind of assignment, but maybe up until this point, things haven't worked out or you still don't have full clarity around what that is. And so this is what, again, this podcast is really all about, helping you to get that clarity and to step boldly into the kingdom assignment that God has given you to influence others. And so I resonate with that. And you mentioned about a turning point in your life where you started to, you came to America and you were 13. My turning point was when I was about 12 years old. And it was like that year, it was a series of unfortunate events that happened over and over and over and over again. And there's those things in your life that happen, they just sort of mark you. And I knew at that point that the trajectory in my life was completely changed. It was never going to be the same. And I think sometimes it has to happen. And then we end up in this longer season of discovery, discovering our influence, discovering how, the events in our life and the things that make us unique will eventually turn into our God-given purpose. So I can definitely resonate with some of that. And I was about the same age. And I think a lot of you may have also experienced something similar. Well, this is, again, what part of this is all about is thinking. And I ask you this question as you're listening is, what were your early upbringing? What did your early upbringing look like? What were the things that really excited you? What were the character traits that you had, the qualities that maybe other people didn't recognize? I know for me, it was leadership. And I struggled for a lot of years with this idea of being a female who's a leader. And, I had religious people come against me. I had all kinds of things because, and this is what influence is all about. Influence is about leadership. When we influence others, we're leading them essentially.
Yeah.
And so, there's always an attack on your voice. There's always an attack on what is the powerful message that God has given you. And when you don't have the blessing of being mentored in this at that early age, you start to take on false identities about who you are and who you've been called to influence. So I see some of that in your story with what you shared about bullying, because I went through the same thing at about that age. I think a lot of people might go through those similar things. But what you need to understand is if you're called and you've been chosen by God, you are going to go through things that you don't expect, like normal people don't feel like they go through. And the bottom line is you're going to go through more intense things.
Wow.
And what it's doing is it's going to cultivate an authority within you. Our authority is in Christ.
Yeah.
But it cultivates a resilience to stand in that authority of that thing that you're called to. And oftentimes it's the areas we are called to that is most often the subject of attack. So I can really resonate with some of what you were sharing. And, and then I think a lot of times we face a moment in our lives of transition. And so again, you being born to influence, you have the ability to influence others. You have the ability to lead them. And then in your process, you're going to go through a place of transitioning. You're going to go from being one way, thinking one way, to God calling you out into thinking in a whole completely different way.
Yeah.
So I can resonate with some of that in my life. And I know that you started to share some of your transition moments. Maybe, I don't know if you want to jump in there on a little bit of that and I could come back to some of mine. But I think that, a big part of, and this is just part of the mission of what we do, is we want to help you to not navigate this alone. Right? You shouldn't have to go through these experiences by yourself. If you understand that it's par for the course, right? These are normal things that you're going to experience in your life if you are called of God, if you are chosen of God, and if you are commissioned by God. It's the 3 C's: called, chosen, and commissioned. I talk about this in my book, Woman of Influence. Now, if you're listening to our podcast, you don't have to be a woman only to listen to our podcast. Right. And part of our movement includes the body of Christ as a whole. But I do talk about that in the book as well. Yeah. So those 3 C's. But if you go through that, yes, you're going to go through things that might not feel average.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. And that brings a very important point, because sometimes we don't think those ideas. Like sometimes we go through a lot of pain, and sometimes we blame ourselves, or we blame others, or we blame maybe the bully or whoever, right? But like you said, sometimes what that's doing is shaping you and your character to what you're going to be doing later on.
Sure.
And I think, like, for me, like, I had a desire and a passion to play professional soccer, and I became very disciplined on doing that. And I was a young man. I was 15, 16, but God was passion to play professional soccer, and I became very disciplined on doing that. And I was a young man. I was 15, 16, but God was developing my character on like the discipline that I'm going to carry on now. So I remember just getting up early and just playing early morning and just like doing what I did, like practicing the moves that I was going to play in the actual game. And I remember like envisioning and imagining myself doing that already. And at that time we didn't have AI. I don't think I had a phone at that time still. But what I did was I drew a picture of myself in a big stadium with all the professional soccer players, and I put the names behind them. And I envisioned myself every single day that I was gonna be there one day. So, yeah, I had somebody reach out to me and said, "Hey, listen, I like the way you play. Who are your parents?" And so I had a chance to be part of, like I talk about this. I think it was a video that we did. I had a chance to be part of the 1%, right? And the most beautiful thing that I learned from all of it, from getting, scouted and almost making it to professional, is that what you trained, you develop for something greater later.
Sure.
But I want to say this to somebody, I don't know who's listening, but you have given up on your dream because the dream that you worked so hard for, it didn't work before. Like you worked, you trained, you were disciplined, you were there in and out and in every single morning and night, and you were just there. But it didn't work out. It didn't happen. And you always question yourself, like, why? But I was so disciplined. But I was so, like, I trained. I had the right mindset. I had the right discipline. But why didn't it happen? And so that was the same questions I had. Like, I literally said to myself, I would never try again as hard as I did. Like, I gave up on my dream.
Right.
And one of my encouragements and motivation was my cousin. And we used to play soccer all the time. Like every single weekend, we used to, like, our cousins, our family, we used to play. And then one day I was playing. I'm like, let's go play soccer. And he said to me, why play if I'm not going to make it to professional? That wrecked me. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, we're practicing. We're going to get there. He's like, no, I'm just going to do what my father does.
Wow.
And so that wrecked me because I used to look up to him. I used to look up because he was really good too. And that wrecked me. And he was like, you know what? He's like, I don't feel like playing anymore. I'm going to do something else. And so from there on, I also kind of like took the identity of like, I'm just going to give up too. Yeah. And my mentality was like, at that time, I was still a young man. I'm just going to give up and never try as hard as I did again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that we all end up in a situation where we face that, and it's like you feel like the death to your dreams.
Yes.
I know for me, and it's really interesting because although yours was in the area of sports, I think God resurrected so much of those things in different ways.
Yeah.
Because I think for you, it was, you loved the sport, but I think what you really loved was the discipline. You loved that you had structure, because when you don't have that in the home as much, it's nice to have something you're working toward that you feel like is giving you an identity. It's giving you a name. And I know for me, would you say that that's true? Does that resonate?
Of course.
And I would say for me, it was a little different. So for me, it was, I always had dreams of being an actress and to go. And then when I was in college, I did theater. I started to do some films, some commercials, and, God had a different plan for me. And it's so funny when you look back at your life and you look at the things that you wanted to do, that you were involved in, that you were excited about.
Yeah.
And then you look back and you say, well, if I would have went that direction, was that really the direction I needed to go? Or was that God protecting me?
Wow.
One of the things that I know that we're called to do is influence. And we're going to talk very briefly about the 7 mountains in today's episode, but we're going to get even deeper in the next episode about the 7 mountains of influence. Yeah. But one of those mountains is media.
Yeah.
One of those mountains is arts and entertainment. And I would not want to do anything other than what I'm doing right now.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful that I'm in this path where God has brought me. Did I ever think that I would help people to publish books and to, launch into their purpose through
Wow.
books and businesses? No,
Yeah.
I never thought that that was going to be my life. But everything that I had worked for leading up to this point, though it didn't look how I thought it was going to look,
Yeah.
everything is being utilized. And that's
Wow.
how God works.
Wow.
So I'll just jump back a little bit to my story. I'm not going to talk too much more about my early upbringing, but I want to jump into the transition point that I faced. And that was when I had lost my job. And, I'm probably talk deeper on this on other episodes as we dig deeper. But just to give you guys a really brief overview, I had lost my position during the C-19 mandates. I don't know what is still trigger words, if that is still a trigger word or not anymore.
Yeah.
But just in case, let's make it, streaming safe. And so for me, I had lost my position, and I do talk about that a lot in the book, Woman of Influence. I go really deep into that transition moment. But there comes a point where we have to really just trust God that we were born to influence. And so in that moment, being in education, yes, I was influencing people. I was influencing my students every day, but God had given me a bigger vision. And I think it all comes back down to vision. And he had given us prophetic words about what we were going to do, even as a couple. And one of the things that he showed us was this picture in Ezekiel where it talks about the dry bones that come to life. And this is a great army that was rising up. So when I look at the people that we have had the blessing of working with, they are that army.
Yeah.
They are people whose dreams feel like they've died in the wilderness. Well, guess what? We're going to resurrect that, and we're going to bring those things back to life. But it might not be in the way that you once thought it was. And it's amazing because depending on when you're watching this, I might have already gone if you're watching this in the future. But did I ever think that I would go to Hollywood as a finalist for Author of the Year? No. But did I think when I was a little girl, I would be in Hollywood, starring in a kid's show? That's what I thought it was going to be. But the mandate that God had for me is so much greater.
Wow.
He said, Danielle, you're going to be in Hollywood, but you're going to be praying over people.
Wow.
You're going to be bringing deliverance to people. That is a far greater weight and a far greater mandate than what my little 7-year-old self could have ever dreamed up as a possibility over people.
Wow.
You're going to be bringing deliverance to people. That is a far greater weight and a far greater mandate than what my little 7-year-old self could have ever dreamed up as a possibility.
Wow.
So God turns everything around. He uses every single bit of our story, of what we've gone through, of our desires, of our dreams, of our hopes. And, it's amazing when we think of our life, how much it really was orchestrated by God in so many ways. And I know that that's hard to hear for some people, because the reality is that, yes, suffering is going to be part of your story.
Yeah.
No matter what, right? But God has a good way of turning pain into purpose.
Yes.
He has a good way of dealing with the painful things that have happened in your life and utilizing them for good. And you'll see this as a full circle thing as you progress towards the promise that God has for your life. So I just wanted to add that in. What are the dreams that have died? And maybe God wants to bring those things back to life, because again, like I said, you were born to influence.
Yeah.
But maybe it's about figuring out where you've been called to influence.
Yeah. There's this is what I sense. I sense that a lot of people have been already dead for 4 days. And some people need that breath of life, the Jesus, when Lazarus died, right? Jesus, he was already in the tomb for 4 days. And she was crying. His sister was crying. He's like, why didn't you come here earlier? Like, what happened? Like, you could have saved my brother from dying, right? And sometimes we ask the same question to the Lord, like, why didn't you come early in my dreams? Like, why didn't you help me earlier? Like, I was younger, now I'm old, or I'm too young to do this, right? And I think what the Lord wants to do in some people's lives is resurrect you back to life.
Come on. That's
because what happened was you had to die before you come to life.
Yeah.
And what happened with me was, and it's amazing how to see what God has done and what he's going to do and what he continues to do is he slowly resurrects what you thought it was already completely dead.
That's right.
Everybody said, no, Lazarus is dead. The Pharisees were like, he can't resurrect that, laughing at him, right? But the reality in the matter is God is trying to resurrect a dream in your life, getting you back to life, to ignite your passion, to ignite your purpose. Because what happens is if we don't live in purpose, like we feel empty, we feel the lack of direction, and we feel like the weight of the world is in our shoulders.
And unrest. Like total unrest. Because, you know, and I remember just being when I was teaching, I remember how many times I was like, man, I would give anything to have this type of lifestyle, to be home, to raise my kids at home, to homeschool. Like these are all things that I prayed so much for. And then when the things started to happen to move me into position to do it, I was like, deer in headlights, like, what? You want me to do what? No, thank you. You know, and I always say like, God is so funny because I like to say I'm stubborn in a good way, you know, like he redeemed my stubbornness. So now I call it persistence, and I can be very persistent. And guess what? That is a great quality to have when you are persistent against the devil and against the kingdom of darkness. But honestly, you know, I would never have left my job. I don't think I would have. I really don't. I was, you know, and again, there's a lot of comes with upbringing. And when we get into episodes about business and all of that, we'll dive deeper into that. But God has a good way of turning everything around. And, you know, here's what I want everyone to know, to take away, is that no matter, you are all called to an area of influence. And it may not, in one season, it could look different. In another season, it could look different. You know, we have gifts, we have talents, all of these things work together. There's our spiritual giftings, there's our skills, there's our life experiences. All these things come together to figure out the reason why you were created and your God-given purpose. And so we've created something here in the movement that we have, which is our path to purpose, what we believe, and we've seen it happen time and time again, that the path to purpose is, first and foremost, it is Jesus. Okay, let's just start with that. Okay, Jesus is the path to purpose. However, there is a practical, when I say practical, I mean there's a blueprint that can help you get to where you want to go faster and an accelerated pace. And we like to call that our path to purpose. And, you know, we start off with books. We're going to talk more about this. Books are a fantastic way of figuring out your story. What is your pain to purpose story? What are the solutions that live inside of you that are waiting and just dying to come out? You're just bursting to get your story out there. And a lot of times people tell me, Daniela, God put in my heart to write a book. And they don't even understand that that's an invitation into your purpose.
Wow.
That really is an invitation into your purpose. And they put it off for years, and they end up in the same situation, the same circumstance. They're like, God, why is my life not progressing? Well, did you write the book? Did you do it? No?
Wow.
Okay, well, go back and do that. And that's what happened in my life. You know, you know my story, and you all that are listening are going to learn my story, but that's a big part of it. And it was after I was obedient to do that other doors started to open up. And then eventually God gave us a business. Some of you are called out of the 9-to-5 because guess what? You're going to be called into marketplace ministry. And some of you are called into just full-time ministry. But God wants you to do it while you're being provided for, right? Donations are wonderful and fantastic. And we have, you know, ministry that we're wanting to launch and things we're going to be doing. But we don't want to beg to do that, you know? And so I think that there's going to be a new generation of people who are rising up to influence others. These are leaders that we're not doing things in the traditional church way. Actually, we're going back a lot to what the early church fathers did. I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but Paul was a tent maker, everyone. Guys, come on. Like, we can talk about business. I want to get into the business ones already. When do we get into those episodes? But realistically, you know, and so a lot of what we do is we help you to do that. We develop it through the book, The book is that lead magnet. Launch the business, get your movement going, and ultimately mobilize your message. And that's what this is about. It's the Mobilize Your Message podcast. We're giving you a vehicle to mobilize your message, to scale, and to get in front of the people that God is calling you to get in front of, because there's nothing worse than having a message inside of you and it not reaching the people that it needs to reach. And so you are in the right place, and we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you touched that, because mobilize your message literally means put the wheels on the car and start moving. Like if you had a car and you didn't have tires, the car's not moving. No, it doesn't matter how expensive you are. Like you have a message that is gold inside of you, but if you don't have the wheels, it's not going anywhere. It's staying right in your driveway. It could be a Lamborghini. It could be the most expensive car, the most beautiful car. You can show it off to your friends, and you can be like, I have this book idea. I have this business idea. I want to be in stages. Like you could talk. You can have a nice conversation. But when you put feet into that action, when you put that tires on that Lamborghini that you've been having inside of you, and you start walking it out, that's when reality kicks in. And that's when your message starts impacting people. We notice, and we've seen it countless and countless and countless again. People say, I have a message to share.
It's so good. Well, I think that this is a wrap for episode 1.
Yes.
One of the things that I wanted to invite you all to do is that we want to help you to get started in this process and take some of the mystery out of this. We have a awesome tool for you. It's called the Kingdom Assignment Discovery Quiz. And you actually get that copy totally for free when you sign up for our challenge. So we will teach you exactly everything that we talked about in the challenge. It's a 3-day event, and we would love to see you there. So the link is going to be in the description. We'd love to have you sign up and to grab that really powerful tool. It's a quiz, and it will give you lots of information on the 7 mountains and figure out where you're called to. And if you do it in time for episode 2, then you're going to really enjoy episode 2 when we dig really deep into the 7 mountains of influence. So I think that that's it for us. So thank you all for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.
You are called to influence.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! I'll see you soon.